Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome way for you to rub elbows with your favorite podcast hosts here on the Sports History Network, while at the same time rooting for your hometown team this upcoming NFL season. You've been hearing all about our partner, Tailgate Fantasy, the past few weeks. Well, dig on this. Tailgate created a special Sports History Network league for our listeners, so we can put the word fan back into fantasy football together. It's free to join, and if you do so before the season kicks off, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for a free t-shirt from one of our other partners, Home Field Apparel. It's a win-win-win! So hurry up today and head to sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate for all the details. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate.
In this episode, we have a visitor that's an old friend of ours that's just found out that he's a collector. He's going to tell us about some of the great pieces of memorabilia that he owns and some of the stories on how he got them, taking us through some legendary NFL players. It's all coming up with Scott Ferguson-Greene in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with PigskinDispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we have another great collector coming on to talk about some pieces of his collection and how they affect and contribute to football history. So we're going to talk a little football history, talk a little bit of memorabilia with our good friend, Scott Ferguson-Greene. Scott, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, Scott, you have been on a bunch of times here, I believe. I remember way back, probably like 3 years ago, we talked about your Phoenixville club, the Union Club of Phoenixville, and some of the great things that they did. And, you really enlightened us with some of that stuff. And we really appreciate you coming on here again to talk about some pieces from your memorabilia collection.
So I never really considered myself a collector. What kind of got everything started was the fact that my dad actually received a autographed football from the 1964 Philadelphia Eagles. Practically the whole team signed it.
Wow.
I believe he still has that. And that was the first thing that I remember that my dad wanted to make sure he kept and preserved. And then recently he got in possession before Tommy McDonald passed away. He got into possession of a hat that Tommy McDonald had signed, and this was just about when he was inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And so unknowingly, I started collecting some memorabilia or collector's items that I didn't even realize I had. As a matter of fact, and until you inquired, I didn't realize that I really do have some collectibles. And one of the first things I collected was there used to be a sports bar in Orange County that actually used to host Pro Bowl parties, the NFL Pro Bowl parties. And they would do that every year. And most of the time they would actually raise money for charity. And I remember that the owner of the sports bar would bring in certain celebrities from the NFL to help raise money. And that's where I got to meet people like Eric Dickerson and Roman Gabriel and Mark Rippon. And I know that one of the things to help raise money, they would have items to be auctioned and you would bid on them. And I decided at the time to bid on a jersey from John Randall of the Minnesota Vikings.
Nice.
And I did win that, and he autographed it. And I still have it. I keep it very pristine. I keep it out of the light because he used a purple marker to actually sign his name. And unless it's a black marker, there's a good chance that if it gets exposed to light too much, that it'll fade. So I was very aware of that. So I kind of make sure I keep it preserved. But that was one of the first things that I collected.
Now, don't they? I believe don't they have like some glass for some jersey case like that are like UV protected to prevent or to at least reduce the time it takes to. I think they have some stuff out on the market like that now.
And I need to pick one up for that jersey for sure. But that was one of the first things that I ever collected. And when they used to have those Pro Bowl parties, when having the former NFL players there, one of the things that I was able to get was an autograph action photo from Eric Dickerson. And I met him, and I told him, when I met him, that I used to love to see him run. And he looked at me with this little smile and he said to me, I was pretty good. I'll always remember that. But I was able to get a autograph action photo from Mark Rippon of the Washington Redskins. And that's when I first met Roman Gabriel of the Los Angeles Rams. I met him at one of those Pro Bowl parties, and we actually became good friends that we would write back and forth for years. And I still have a collection of handwritten letters, autograph photos that he would sign. And when he would sign the autograph photos, he always would put Roman Gabriel 1969 MVP on each one of those. And he was just a really, really nice guy. And I really enjoyed being able to correspond with him and talk football. And I remember telling him in those days when I was a kid that the marquee second game, if there was a second game to a doubleheader, was the 49ers Rams game, because that game was always between the Los Angeles Rams, San Francisco 49ers, Roman Gabriel versus John Brody, the fearsome foursome versus the offensive line of the 49ers. They were always classic games. And so it was kind of nice to be able to have those conversations with Roman Gabriel and talking about those days. And he is surprised at how much I used to remember with certain games, like the 1967 LA Rams season and the 1969 LA Rams season, when they were just always trying to stave off the Baltimore Colts in those matchups. And he says, you really remember all that? I said, absolutely. I said, because back then, those were the marquee games that were on CBS.
Yeah, wow. I can't even. Now you're going to make me go back and try to find some footage of some of those Brody Gabriel games, because that does sound like a great matchup.
And I still have a photo that he and I had taken at the Pro Bowl party, which I really do cherish, because I remember he was wearing a white cowboy hat. And Roman Gabriel's a big guy. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1". I'm over 200 pounds. But Roman Gabriel is taller than I am. And he must have been tough to bring down as a quarterback, because this is a big guy. And he always pretty much stayed in shape, even when I met him. So even after his playing days, he pretty much stayed in shape. But I really, truly cherish my friendship with him. I know that most recently he's been going through a few health problems. But I would like, at some point, that if there are any pro football events out here on the West Coast, that he would fly in from North Carolina. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be nice to be able to see him again.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. And I guess just an editor's note here for the listeners. Scott saying he's a tall individual. Well, Scott is also very flexible, because we found this summer that we can take somebody with the height of Scott and crunch them up into a ball and stick them in the back of a Toyota, in the third seat of a Toyota, and drive across Pennsylvania. And we did that. And Scott's probably still suffering from that, but we had a great little road trip.
Well, it still was better than any airplane that I'm in, especially with, them reducing the space in between seats. So
that's painful.
One of the other really cherished collections that I have is I got signed photographs from the 1951 LA Rams elephant backfield, 2 of the 3 members.
Really?
Yes. Deacon Dan Taller and Paul Tank Younger. And I have to tell you, Paul Tank Younger was such a funny man. Like, he would drop one-liners and would have you just cracking up. He had that type of personality that was symptomatic of the players of the 1950s NFL players, that they didn't get much pay, but they played for the love of the game. And at that particular time, they always found ways to enjoy life. And I can tell you that Paul Tank Younger was one of those players. I really enjoyed talking to him. I still wish that he was alive today. And I really cherish having an autograph photo of he and Deacon Dan Taller. And the fact that I got a chance to know him and have conversations with him, because he was just a great human being, and just a really nice guy that you'd want to be around and have a couple of beers with, because he, like Art Donovan, would just tell stories of a lot of different incidences that happened during the 50s. And you would love to listen to Paul Tank Younger, but I do cherish that particular piece of memorabilia that I have and I keep sacred.
Oh, I'm sure you do. Now, let me ask you a question about, the very first item you talked about, and I believe you said it belongs to your father, is 1964 autographed Eagles football. Who were some of the players that were on that ball that signed it?
Pete Retzlaff was one of them.
Okay.
And Tommy McDonald, I believe, was still on that team. I think it was just before Bobby Brown's stint with the Eagles, but I think he might have been on that. And I believe Sonny Jurgensen was on that team, because that was just before he got traded to the Washington Redskins. Those were some of the names that I do remember. My dad, because I was a little kid, my dad would not let me touch that football for a long time.
I bet.
You get a actual authentic NFL Duke football, and he was not going to put that in the hands of little kids. That's for sure.
Yeah, he'd look out the back window and you're kicking it around the yard.
Exactly.
Wow, very cool. So that's probably like a couple years after, like, Norm Van Brocklin, or he's probably gone by that point off the
right.
Eagles.
Norm Van Brocklin won the 1960 championship with the Eagles as the starting quarterback, and then retired right after that.
Okay.
Because he ended up being the coach of the Minnesota Vikings just a couple of years later, where he used to have those run-ins with Fran Tarkington.
Right. Yeah. And then he was with the Falcons too. Wasn't he their first coach also? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. We had the opportunity. We talked to his daughter, who wrote sort of a memoir, a sort of a love story between her father, Norm Van Brocklin, and her mother, their courtship while they were both attended Oregon. And it was quite a beautiful story, and a lot of good football to it. And we had a great conversation with her. So yeah, he's always on my mind here now.
Right. One of the other collections that I have that I really cherish is when Lamar Lundy of the Fearsome Foursome became ill, his son Lamar III and the other members of the Fearsome Foursome decided to have a fundraiser to help pay for Lamar Lundy's medical bills. So that was held in the early 2000s, and that was held at California State Fullerton football field. And all the members of the Fearsome Foursome, plus Roger Brown, who replaced Rosie Greer after Rosie retired, they were all there, and they did a meet and greet to all the fans. And then there was a photo that they had duplicated of the Fearsome Foursome, and each member of the Fearsome Foursome signed that photo of the four of them. And I ended up getting two of them. I got one for my dad. And even to this day, before my dad retired, he put that photo in a frame and put it up in his office at work. And then after he retired, now he has it up in his office back at his home, my parents' home in New Jersey. And he's so proud of that, because he would get a lot of comments on having that photo signed by all four members of the Fearsome Foursome. And I felt a little bit bad for Roger Brown, because most of the photos that actually were duplicated was of Lamar Lundy, Merlin Olsen, Deacon Jones, and Rosie Greer. And Roger Brown would sign autographs of him with the Fearsome Foursome, but it wasn't staged. It wasn't, set up as the others. So, but he was very, gracious about it. And, he would sign autographs, and it was a pleasure meeting him. Roger Brown's a very nice man, but I really cherish that. And I keep that for safekeeping. I don't have it in a frame. I do have it under glass right now. Because I just absolutely love it. And it's one of the collectibles that I really, it values a lot to me, so
I bet that's a pretty cool piece.
And I got to meet Deacon Jones because of that particular event. But also too, Deacon Jones, who was one of the most generous human beings I've ever met in my life. He and his wife Elizabeth set up a
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.